Heroes are people the common masses look up to, as they are the pinnacle of human dreams. It does not matter whether history considers them to be good or evil, as these are the traits that make them human. This video series' purpose is to look into the way the Fate franchise handles these legends based on their profile in Fate, Grand Order and other Typemoon resources. This time in the class of Avenger, EDMOND DANTES, the future Count of Monte Cristo.
俺を呼んだな、復讐の化身を。そうとも、俺こそ黒き怨念、エクストラクラス、アベンジャーである。
Attendre et espérer. EDMOND DANTES is based on the main character from Alexandre Dumas' famous novel The Count of Monte Cristo, released in 1844. Edmond was a young sailor in Marseille who was asked by a dying man to deliver a letter. Said man was secretly a supporter of the then exiled French Emperor Napoleon. Unfortunately for Dantes, many people on his crew were aware of this special item he held. Jealousy over his rise to the rank of captain and the beautiful woman he was engaged to grew amongst them. This led to the young man being wrongfully accused to be a Bonapartiste on the day he was set to marry his betrothed Mercedes. The prosecutor, Gérard de Villefort, who inspected the letter, almost gave him his freedom back, had Villefort not noticed that the recipient was his own father. In the danger of ruining his own ambitions and reputation, he imprisoned Dantes for life to silence him.
God has everything to do with it. He's everywhere. He sees everything.
All right. Let's make a bargain, shall we? You ask God for help, and I'll stop the moment he shows up.
Believing in God, Edmond endured 6 years of hellish torture and tried to kill himself by self-enforced starvation until another inmate popped up in his cell, trying to dig an escape tunnel.
I am Abbe Faria. I have been a prisoner in Chateau d'If for 11 years.
Who would teach Edmond every known science of the early 19th century.
I offer knowledge. Everything I have learned. I will teach you economics, mathematics, philosophy, science. To read and write? Of course.
In the 8 years that they were planning their escape, Dantes learned languages, mathematics, social studies, physics, martial arts and fencing from Faria.
Define economics.
Economics is a science that deals with production, distribution and consumption of commodities.
There is a reaction to every action in physics and in man.
Unfortunately, he would not live to see his freedom returned and gave Edmond the location of the treasure of Monte Cristo. In order to escape, Edmond switched places with Faria's corpse, which was placed in a burial sack. The wardens, unaware of this, threw the sack into the ocean, believing they were simply disposing of a corpse. It was Dantes, however, who was tossed into the sea. His escape and subsequent finding of the treasure of Monte Cristo would be the foundation of his new identity as Count and the first step towards his long path of revenge against the man responsible for his misery. But this part of the story is not incorporated into his Fate Grand Order version, as he is summoned at the peak of his tale when he had sharpened his mind and was on his way to turn into the Count, the transformation of an underdog into a top dog. He refuses to take on the name of Count Monte Cristo, as it does not resemble the state he was summoned in. This is a reasonable action, considering that all servants are summoned with all necessary information about the modern world. Thus, he would know that he is in fact a fictional character, and that his journey would move on after he delivered justice to his wrongdoers. Yet, this version is still driven by vengeance, and thus cannot acknowledge the end of his own story.
Let's just say it's vengeance.
Thus, he wants to be referred to as either Edmond Dantes or the King of a Cavern, which was what the first translation of his story in Japan was called. This is reasonable as well, since having the information of something and actually having the memory of experience are two completely different things. A character rejecting his future is thus quite sensible, especially when that person was fighting his own fate as much as he did. As an interesting side fact, Florence Nightingale is summoned without memories into the projection of Chateau d'If during Dantes' introductionary event. As Avenger and the Master encounter her, he calls her Mercedes. Yet they seem to be complete opposites of each other. He, who was almost driven to madness, abandoning his belief in God and maintaining his sanity sorely due to his drive for vengeance, and she, who in her faith and the holy mission given to her by the Lord, was driven to madness in order to fulfill her purpose. Ironically enough, both even lived in the same era. This pretty much explains why Avenger is his most befitting class here. He might actually be a servant that should not even be summonable as a berserker in the first place, as that would completely go against the core concept of this fictional character. Sabre and Rider are possible as well, but seem extremely weak by comparison. For his noble phantasm, only few aspects of his story qualify. Either the treasure of Monte Cristo that he found, or his vengeance which was built up through his stay at the hellish prison given a physical form. His noble phantasm in the game is called Chateau d'If. Its conception is unfortunately rather weak. The description reads, by performing super high-speed thinking and forcibly reflecting that on the body, he subjectively realizes a super high-speed action that makes it seem like a time halt is being employed. Effectively, it creates afterimages that all attack at the same time, bombarding the opponent with energy blasts, and while the idea of his prison break allowing him to break free of space and time is interesting, its execution is rather boring. A far more enticing concept would be the opposite, Edmond creating a reality marble that confines his opponent in the same hell that he had to endure, slowing down their concept of time and driving them mad. Perhaps similar to what the character Kurotsuchi Mayuri used in the Huecomundo arc of Bleach. The noble phantasm does, however, inflict defense down and curse with its overcharge effect, which are both very suitable in the context of that. Moving on to his skills, he has Determination of Steel EX, which is absolutely fitting and gives him debuff resistance, attack buffs, and piercing invincibility. Golden Rule A improves his NP generation, which is kind of a paradox. On one hand, the rank A makes sense as he is fated to become incredibly rich, even though this version has not really embraced that yet. The social Golden Rule would be even more fitting, as treat others the way you want to be treated is kind of macabre if you think about how he was treated and his subsequent retaliation. A skill update reflecting that would be appreciated. His third skill, Wisdom of Predicament A, truly fits him perfectly. It may very reasonably be upgraded to EX in the future. As an Avenger, he has the obvious passive Avenger A, which grants him huge NP generation when he's being hit by an enemy. If the fame of his story wouldn't have declined so much in recent years, we would consider the EX rank. As he didn't become Avenger through death, it may be reasonable to assume that the fact that he was able to get salvation stops memory correction from ranking above B. The self-replenishment rank D really depends on how you look at him. Obviously, he has become very resourceful, and thus may find uses from things where others aren't looking, but really a higher rank would easily be possible if his noble phantasm was to recreate his prison and thus create a territory for himself. Perhaps it is because the noble phantasm doesn't really recreate the cell that it only ranks at D, but with a different concept, a B rank should easily be possible. Thus, he could also own the passive territory creation at least rank B, regardless of his class. He packs an endurance of A+, which one would assume is the highest a normal human can achieve. His agility, however, is at a surprising low C, which is at odds with the description of his noble phantasm, but fine under normal circumstances. His mana is at a B rank, which definitely should be lower, maybe a C rank at best. Avenger class or not, strength B is also acceptable, if you consider the strength of will granting him superhuman powers while his luck stat is non-existent, which is a given for fictional book characters with a singular possible path. What rank should his noble phantasm have though? Considering his dwindling fame, an A rank is just too strong for such a weak concept. Would it have been different? And this is not necessarily our recommendation, but just a more solid concept. A higher rank could have been acceptable, but in its current state, we would give it a C+. Now, the only thing left to discuss is his design choice. Komatsuzaki Rui seems to be a perfect choice of artist for a character that met despair head on. Yet his clothes seem to be a bit too out of place. Of course, some heroic spirits like to dress in a more modern way, but since we do not have the servant being a count yet, a well-dressed Dantes is just unlikely. Additionally, his style feels much closer to the English industrial style, rather than the typical French attire of the time. A male Jack the Ripper would have been more suited for this style in our humble opinion. Perhaps a ragged 19th century captain attire would have been a better pick for Edmond, considering the imprisonment right after his promotion. All in all, his representation is surely no insult to the famous book character, yet certain aspects could have been improved on. But perhaps we will be granted with the actual Count of Monte Cristo in the future. Additionally, based on his lore and abilities, we would personally rank him as a tier 3 servant, since his story surely is famous enough, but it is about the tenacity a normal human being can achieve. That's why we give him, overall, a solid rank B. The words you should remember when hearing his tale are the following. Jusqu'au jour où Dieu daignera dévoiler l'avenir à l'homme, toute la sagesse humaine sera dans ces deux mots, attendre et espérer. Wait and hope.
Hello guys, here's the obligatory end card crap I don't really care about, but I have to do so people watch my videos. Remember this weird bell which nobody needs, click on it so you see everything when I uploaded it. Don't forget liking and sharing, especially on Facebook and Twitter, it really helps so people will see my videos. If you want a certain character to appear on our videos, it's best that you write it down in the comments section, but please be aware that we are only going to talk about characters that so far are released on the